When healing begins, purpose awakens. This is a major insight into faith, healing, and purpose. Welcome back to a major insight into faith, healing, and purpose. I am your host, Ashley Major, and it is always a pleasure to be back here with you all. For those of you that are new, this is a safe space where we talk about all things faith, healing, and purpose. And so we're going to talk about how you can transform your faith, how you can heal to whole, and how you can walk in your God-given purpose. And tonight we have an amazing topic. It's a topic that needs to be had. It's a topic that is deeply rooted. It is a topic that a lot of people don't really talk about. And tonight we get to have that conversation. And we also get to have that conversation with a special guest. And so if you are returning, welcome back. Let us know where you are tuning in from. Drop it in the chat. And we look forward to just seeing all of your feedback, your value, your breakthroughs, any aha moments that you may have along this journey with us. So tonight, I have the honor of introducing to you guys Miss Priscilla María Gutiérrez. I hope I pronounced that right. I tried to roll those R's. But Priscilla is a certified trauma-informed life coach and keynote speaker, and is known as the Cycle Breaker Coach on social media. She's the founder of the Cycle Breakers Club, and she empowers entrepreneurs to break generational cycles by transforming their mindset, building mindful habits, and setting soul-aligned goals through individual as well as group coaching. She's a mental health speaker, so she has been trusted to speak and facilitate safe spaces for colleges and mental health organizations across the country, y'all. And the country being the US, right? So she's also spoken at Johns Hopkins University as well as NAMI, Florida, and is also a proud graduate of the Johns Hopkins University and the UC Irvine School of Law. Priscilla draws from her healing journey to inspire others to rise with clarity, purpose, and power. And she was an attorney, y'all. So she'll get to tell you guys more of her story. But I want to introduce you guys to Miss Priscilla. Priscilla and I actually are part of one of a mentorship group, and so that's how we met. And it's been a pleasure just to see her just flourish and grow and thrive in her craft and be able to transform lives through helping people break those generational cycles. So Priscilla, welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be a guest. And like you mentioned, we're part of a group together. So we've been connected for a little while. So it's really special to now have this amazing conversation together.
Yes. Well, let's jump right into this, y'all. So Priscilla, just tell us a little about your story. Tell us, give me 1 second. You look like you're frozen. There you go. All right. You're back with us. Okay. So tell us a little about your story and what led you to become a certified trauma coach and the Cycle Breaker Coach.
Yes, thank you. So I like to say that this career choice chose me. So as you mentioned, I went to school for law. I graduated with my JD, but I chose not to continue in the field of law. And I really answered an inner calling. And it's wild because prior to this interview, I saw this article that was entitled something along the lines of, success isn't always fulfilling for many first-gen Latinas. And I haven't even read it yet, but just that title spoke to me because that's how I felt. when I graduated from Johns Hopkins, I graduated from UC Irvine School of Law, I did not feel fulfilled. I felt like I played a role. I did what I was supposed to or was expected to, but I didn't feel personally fulfilled and in alignment with the career I had ahead of me. So I really took some time to reflect. I had enough clarity that I knew law was not the path for me, but I didn't have enough clarity to know, well, what is your path? And so it did take a lot of self-discovery, being open-minded to different fields. So I did work for a law firm. I did work in the nonprofit industry. And ultimately, I found my way to life coaching. I had actually saw it online, and I was curious after seeing this coach's profile. They are a trauma recovery coach, and I had never heard of anything like that. So I just started to get curious and had to investigate. And ultimately, I did the same certification. And so, is everything good? Okay.
There you go. We're back.
Okay, perfect. So I'm not sure where it cut off, but
you can
long story short,
started the coaching program.
Okay, perfect. So I really just took a leap of faith. And I remember that process of reaching out to certain friends and being like, should I do it? Should I not do it? Like, I'm scared to invest in myself and invest in my dream, but I went for it. And I feel like everything aligned so well so that I was able to be with my family during certain milestones. I was able to afford to send myself to the certification program and et cetera. And so it really has been a journey. It's still a journey that I'm on, where I'm still refining, what is my brand? What is my target audience? What are my goals? And so all that to say that life coaching and speaking really chose me.
I love that. And it really does, right? Because a lot of what we go through, our experiences tend to lead us along this journey. And it doesn't really manifest itself until we, like you say, it feels like it's a pulling, it's a calling, it's choosing you to go in this direction. And so I love that. I love that, you did not miss the opportunity to take the bull by the horn and really go after it, right? You saw that this was something that chose you and you decided to give it your all because you are now full-time in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Awesome.
All in it.
So,
Yep.
so with that said, right, you talk about trauma, breaking the cycles, like that. That's your name, the cycle breaker coach. So what in your life actually led you to be the trauma coach or the cycle breaker coach? Because we know that usually it is our past, our experiences that really opens us up and forces us, kind of pushes us into our purpose, right? So what about your
Yeah.
story, if you'd like to dive into that, led you to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because my birthday was on Friday. And so
Oh, happy belated.
I had some family. Thank you. And so I had some family come and visit from Los Angeles. And I had a great time. But I could also kind of just the conversations we had and reminiscing and talking about different parts of our family history. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of cycles. There's a lot of generational wisdom, but also generational trauma that gets recycled and circulated. And so that was a pretty big reminder as to why I am so passionate about the work that I do, because as you mentioned, yeah, it does stem from individual experiences. And so I've been in and out of therapy since I was about 17. And by the time I was in my late 20s, I kind of realized, individual trauma and experiences, it's not the whole story. I know that this work, there's still a missing puzzle piece. And to me, that puzzle piece was the family story, the family legacy. And once I started to be more curious, I started seeing patterns. I started seeing certain things that I thought were just normal, or that's how that person's personality is. That's how my personality is. You know, things are just the way it is. And I started to realize, actually, no, they're not. You know, sometimes we react a certain way, or our culture stems from trauma responses, or our views, our ways of thinking, handling conflict, our relationships. You know, I was noticing common threads. And so that really got me interested in exploring, you know, I'm sure it's not just my family. I'm sure this, you know, happens with a lot of families. And so the more I read about it, learned about it, I was like, yeah, this is definitely not just an inkling. This is reality for many people. And even on a cellular level, you know, epigenetics is a study of how this can affect the way our DNA is translated. I'm not a scientist, so I don't even know how to communicate that, but It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen does a great job of explaining how literally what your parents went through and your grandparents went through can trickle down into your own body and how your body forms and reacts.
I love that. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen. That's a great book, y'all. So if y'all pick it up, pick it up. And I like what you mentioned in regards to, I'm a nerd here, so we talk about books all the time. I always recommend books. I like that you referenced a book. And so I like that you mentioned that, you know, a lot of the patterns you started to recognize, because we can get so self-absorbed and just think about ourselves and not realize, like, okay, you know, where is this really rooted? Where is this coming from? And sometimes it is, you know, it is those generational habits and patterns and paradigms that are passed down, right? And so I like that you started looking outside of yourself, and that's a big thing, right? We have to look outside of ourselves too, because some of those traumas are passed down. So how do we recognize the difference between who we are and the patterns that are passed down from unhealed traumas?
That's a great question. I would say from my own experience, it took a lot of reflection. And so growing up, and maybe you can relate to this or someone listening, you might have been told, like, you're just like your elder, you know, insert here. You're just like your father, your mother, your grandmother, etc. And so I grew up hearing that a lot. And I saw a lot of different models of behavior and thinking, such as black and white thinking, such as if you do me wrong, I cut you off for years, such as divorce, such, you know, a lot of different things that were just normal. It was normal for me to see both sets of grandparents hate each other and not want to be in the same room with each other. And so when I left to college and I was able to see other family dynamics and really meet other people who grew up completely different than me, I was like, oh, not everyone resolves conflict the same way that my family does, or not everyone, you know, thinks in such catastrophic terms or worst case scenario. And so I think for me, once I really invested and went through a lot of healing, I was able to distinguish trauma responses from who am I really? And so when I was actively in my binge drinking or my eating disorder, that version of myself was not my true authentic self. That was someone operating in emotional survival mode who was very dysregulated. And so a lot of those behaviors that resulted from that dysregulation, such as, you know, aggression, a lot of isolation, very closed off, that really isn't who I am truly. And I realized that because once I started to be more open and get the right treatment, I was able to be more soft, more vulnerable, more confident in myself and comfortable in myself, and be like, oh, like I actually like being around people. I actually really like helping people and being compassionate. And so there really is no guidebook for one size fits all, but I would say the best place to start is to be curious about yourself.
Mm. I love that. I love the fact that you talked about just now how you found yourself coming outside of the environment that you were in. You were able to see that this wasn't the norm. This isn't how everybody acts. And so now you get to look at, you get to take a deeper look, one at who you are and the things that you actually like versus, the things that had you in survival mode. And I think a lot of times, because from my own experience, it's been the same, right? Going through these cycles of, well, I don't like this, I don't like that. And, I'm not a people's person, but then everyone, Ash, yeah, you are, this is your true self. But because I got so accustomed to, not trusting people that I was very closed off. And so only the people that I trusted actually got to see that, yeah, Ash is a people's person. Ash she love a good time. She love to have fun. But if you are not within that circle, you wouldn't see the true, authentic, person. And that comes with having a safe space, right? Because through you being able to be curious about yourself, being able to now learn more about who you are, you found the environment that allowed you to flourish in that, right? You were able to take yourself out of the environment that, wasn't really serving you, and be able to grow in who you are and get to know yourself. And I love that, because it brings me to the next question of, what does breaking a generational cycle actually look like?
Yeah,
So
I
we
love that
start off
question.
curious, but what's the next step?
Mm-hmm. So depending on what the cycle is, whatever it is, it's going to look like taking action. So action is the main part. And that action can look like many different things. It could look like seeing a therapist. It can look like healing the relationship with your body. It can look like becoming part of a safe community. So like you said, safety is really important. And so one thing I learned as I was older is that your family is your chosen family. They can be biologically related to you or not. And so I strongly encourage, whatever cycle it is and whatever the action looks like, that you include community and be really intentional with who you surround yourself with. So like you said, and I can totally identify with that, where I've always been the same person. And the more you know me, the more you realize and see my silly side, my funny side, my all types of sides. And it's not that this just emerged out of thin air. It's always been there, but only certain people had access to that. And so as I continue my healing, more people have access to it, because I want to give myself those connections. I want to give myself those experiences. And so even that is breaking a cycle, is allowing yourself to experience a life that is more fulfilling and joyous. And so I'll pick another cycle, with the drinking, as I mentioned, that is definitely a generational cycle in my family on both sides. And so it's so ironic, because my parents, they're not drinkers. They never were drinkers. They've never been intoxicated or blacked out or anything like that. And it's because of their upbringing. So my mother, for example, her house in Ecuador doubled as a bar. So she grew up around drunk people all the time, and, just saw a lot of things. And so, a long story short, both of them, there was never alcohol in the house, but my brother and myself both developed alcohol use disorder. And his looked different than mine, but at the end of the day, both alcohol use disorder. And so my version of breaking that cycle was going to rehab, was going to substance abuse support groups, was continuing to go to therapy, and was making a promise to myself when I was 20 that I'm done. And I'm 34 now, so it's wild to me. You know, when I stopped drinking, I didn't think it would be forever, but it has morphed into that. And to me, that is me continuing to break that cycle, because the thing about, and a cycle is a metaphor. You can call it whatever you want. Some people call them curses. Some people call them, trauma. But the thing is, with healing, it's not linear. So I personally never sleep on my healing. I'm never of the mindset of, oh, I'm healed. Like, I'm good now. I think I'll go back to drinking. I got it all figured out. Nah, I think I'm going to not. I think I'm going to not do that. I think I'm going to continue to work on myself. And I see it as the chronic condition that it is, because I do have diagnoses of mental illness. And so like with any chronic condition like diabetes, you need to manage it. You need to have a treatment plan. You need to have medical professionals. And so I know, and I have shown myself, whenever any of those factors are not in line, it affects, my mental health. And so every day I'm committed to breaking the cycle. Every time I take my medication, every time I choose healthy coping skills, that's me choosing to change the narrative and not repeat patterns of dysfunction that I saw growing up.
Yeah. The narrative, change the narrative, and understanding that it is an ongoing process. I think it's vital, because you are a mindset coach, right? So I think that, with understanding this process is ongoing, healing is never healing is not a destination. It's a journey, right? It's something you get to experience, and you get to love to experience by becoming your better self. And I love that you shared the fact that it is an ongoing journey. I feel like a lot of people, they want to get to a point and they try to live up to this persona that I am healed, and then something comes and then they're triggered and they're right back, but then now they're feeling disappointed because I thought I was over this, and now they go back into a cycle, right? So breaking that cycle is a daily decision. I love that you shared that.
Yes.
And so what are some mindset shifts? And I think we spoke about a few of them, but what are some like definitive mindset shifts that someone that wants to start breaking a cycle can really just help them to shift their paradigms and their belief system?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say the biggest one is to go from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Some people call it the scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset, but essentially reframing what happens to you and how you perceive it. Because in life, it's about 10%. There's a quote that says it's about 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And so I can't control what someone says to me, what someone thinks about me. But within my control is whether I believe it or not, whether I respond to it, and whether I allow it to affect my day. And so with a growth mindset, the whole concept is to pivot the negative to positive. So for example, if something that I try to do doesn't pan out and I fail, I can choose to either let it define me and keep me stuck and feed a lot of negative thoughts, or I can choose to frame it as opportunity. Okay, I didn't have success with this. What can I learn from it? What can I do to improve? And when you have a growth mindset, you essentially believe that you are constantly growing. You are able to improve your skill set, improve your talent, improve your intelligence. When you have a fixed mindset, you think this is what it is. This is what I was born with, and I can't do anything about it. And so often with trauma survivors, a lot of us have a fixed mindset because of a lot of different reasons. And so it has been really empowering for me to start to pivot and say, okay, like, for example, with not becoming and pursuing law, I can make that narrative as, you know, negative as I want to make it, or I can believe what other people have told me. Not sure if I lost you. Or if it's just my screen.
No, I'm here. I just was putting you full screen.
It's just my screen. Okay, thanks. And so, yeah. And so, and also internalize what others have criticized me. Or I can pivot and say, because I went to law school, I learned how to analyze better, to problem solve, to communicate better, to write better. I met incredible people. I met my best friend. You know, that feels a lot better. That feels a lot softer. That feels a lot more productive. And so with whatever happens to you, no matter how small or how big, I encourage you to reframe it to your own benefit. What is the most positive or generous interpretation of those facts that will help me move forward and accomplish my goals? And I do also want to note, it's not a way to invalidate yourself. So if you're sad, you're allowed to be sad. If you're frustrated, you're allowed to be frustrated. Your anger is valid, etc. But at the end of that, I want you to take some time to hold space for, okay, where's the growth in this? Where's the opportunity in this? That personally has helped me with my healing.
I love that. I love that growth mindset. You know, I don't know. Have you heard of you know about Keke Palmer, right? The actress.
Yeah, I love her.
She is the queen of reframing. She says, she did an interview the other day, and she said, you know, like I always operate with a healthy mindset, a positive mindset, because I'm the queen of reframing. Like, nobody's gonna steal her joy, because if it's a bad thing, she's gonna reframe it into something good. If she doesn't get an acting role, she said, well, they lost the best actress they'd ever have, you know, like, and you know,
I saw that. Yeah, exactly.
It's not delusion. It's the fact that she get to choose to, you know, create her experience and make it a joyous one. And I feel like a lot of times we get so caught up in the negative and in the self-pity and just feeling down and hard on ourselves that we don't realize that we have the power to shift our perspective. We have the power to think with a positive mindset, to grow, to evolve, to learn from our mistakes so that we can become better and we can break the cycles that seem to be holding us back. So I love that, you know, the growth mindset, shifting your mindset from a fixed state to a growth state. I love that. So you mentioned therapy. You mentioned, you know, seeing somebody. Now, what advice would you give to somebody that is, you know, resistant to, you know, wanting to just open up to somebody else, feeling like they have to carry it alone, and you know, they don't want to see a therapist? Because you know, a lot of people have this mindset that if you see a therapist, then you have a mental illness, or there's a stigma behind therapy and coaching and actually getting somebody to help you on this journey. So what advice would you give to somebody that, you know, knows that there's some changes that need to be made, knows that there's some cycles that need to be broken, but they are resistant to actually seeking help?
Yeah, that's very relatable. I grew up in a culture where my parents are pretty progressive, so they didn't fall into that, but different elders were like, you know, to go see a psychiatrist or a therapist was an insult. You know, like, you're crazy, or it wasn't a good thing. And so a couple of things came to mind as I listened to you. Well, when it comes to, if you go see a therapist, you have mental illness. The reality is, if you have a mental illness, whether you go see a therapist or not, those symptoms will persist if you have them. Now, you won't get an official diagnosis because you're preventing yourself from getting that diagnosis. But if you have PTSD, for example, you're still going to have nightmares. You're still going to be hypervigilant. You're still going to deal with a lot of stress. And so it's really up to you to pause and reflect and ask yourself, what benefits am I getting from my resistance? How is this helping me move forward? Am I getting in my own way? And what will happen if I continue to resist and I continue to deny myself support? What is going to happen? If I look at the last 6 months, what evidence does that give me of healing, of improvement? And I also have a lot of compassion for those that are legitimately concerned about seeking medical support. A lot of people have different experiences. You know, if you look historically, there's been a lot of medical racism and medical just crimes done against people of color. If you are a survivor of sexual trauma, you may feel uncomfortable being in a room alone with someone, especially the same gender of your perpetrator. And so I definitely want, you know, for those listening, like, it's not a judgment. Your fear, concern is valid, but I just want you to hold space and allow yourself the opportunity to see different sides and be able to separate, okay, is this coming from a legitimate fear? Is this coming from my ego? Is this coming from just a deep concern for what other people think? Because ultimately, you have to go to bed with yourself every night and live in your body every day, nobody else. And so if someone is willing to judge you for getting you the medical support that you need, that's probably not someone that is truly invested in your best interests. Because if I were to break my arm, I would never go to a friend who isn't a doctor and be like, hey, what should I do? So if I have a broken nervous system, I'm not going to go to my friend who is not well-versed or trained in psychological conditions to treat me. So it's very interesting how sometimes people choose, like, you have to choose between God and therapy, but not God and an oncologist when you have cancer. So it's very, people are going to have their own perspectives, but at the end of the day, I want everyone listening to know that mental health conditions are legitimate medical conditions. They're not character flaws. They're not opinions. They're not made up. They are real, and it's okay to get support for them.
I love that you gave that perspective on how people make decisions, right? When you said they wouldn't go to a therapist or see a psychiatrist, they'll be like, well, God's going to fix it. But then when it comes to, you know, their other health ailments, they quick to go to a doctor. And I think that, you know, again, it's the stigma around it. And I think, you know, as we, you know, society grows and evolves, it is becoming more acceptable. It is actually a hot topic. If you're not seeing a therapist, then what are you doing, right? And so I feel like, and I laugh about it because I just talked to my therapist. Like, you find people just casually talk about it now, but you do have those people that still hold on to that past stigma, right? And so I think that's great advice that you gave. But I do want to actually bring in to, you know, your faith. I know you are a believer, and so how do you tie in faith with what you share in terms of breaking generational cycles? Because, you know, the Bible talks about it. You mentioned the curses, right? And you also spoke about generational wisdom. So how do you intertwine your faith with your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I would describe myself as spiritual, and I do believe in God, source, higher power. I was raised Catholic. And so actually, when we were talking about, the previous part, that also came to mind before you even mentioned faith, because I know in some faiths, and I won't mention any by name, that I've heard from others, you are supposed to be happy. You are supposed to smile. To not be happy and smiling is like an offense to God. And so that's another reason that some people don't access, is because they religious reasons or things like that. And so with me, despite not affiliating with a denomination, I have witnessed a miracle, at least one miracle in my life, and that's my brother and him rising from his deathbed. And so that definitely ties into a lot of my work when it comes to speaking about resilience. It took a lot of resilience to survive that, and it's still a journey that's continuing years later. It also ties into a growth mindset, because I've seen my brother adapt to so many different challenges and overcome them. And that is a growth mindset at work. When people are telling you, you're not going to be able to do this, you shouldn't do this, and doing it anyway and showing them wrong, that takes a lot of self-confidence, and really believing that with practice, I can increase my skills and increase my abilities. And so I always have him as that example, where it's like, the mindset is extremely powerful. Your mind is your world. If you decorate your mind with negativity, your life is going to be very negative. You're going to surround yourself and accept very negative connections and very negative experiences. And so it's definitely tied into my faith, because my faith is very strong. We all will continue to have obstacles throughout life. Although I've already had some obstacles, that doesn't mean that, okay, you've had your traumas, you've met your quota. No, life is going to keep lifing. And so I still lean on faith every day. I still pray every day. I still ask to receive, and I practice, certain beliefs that I grew up with, such as forgiveness, such as being generous and kind and loving to other people. And so it's definitely interconnected for sure.
I love that. I know you didn't want to mention any specific religions, but I do believe that it's more religious relationship, right? Because you can have religion, but if you don't have a relationship, you really don't have faith. And so I love that you touched on that too as well. So we got some exciting things to talk about.
Yes. I'm with it.
So thank you so much for pouring your heart out and just sharing your professional insight, as well as your personal journey and personal story. But I know you have a book coming out, and it is called Breaking the Cycle Before It Breaks You. So tell us about this book. Tell us where we can find it, when it's going to be available. Just tell us all the goodness.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. I apologize. I just had to connect the charger. But yes, I really appreciate our conversation, and just, you never know someone's story until you really start to speak with them. And I feel like no matter where you're from, like we're from different cultures, etc., but there's still so much common ground we can find. And so I'm thankful for that. And I hope that those listening also found some common ground in what we talked about. And as far as the book, so yes, it's Break the Cycle Before It Breaks You. It's in its editing stage. So I don't have a specific date, but definitely before the end of the year, as soon as possible, hopefully way before that. But it will be available online, on Amazon, on pretty much anywhere you can get a book. And so I'm super excited about that. That's been a labor of love. It's been a dream of mine to have my own book and to express the things that I'm going to express. And so I really recommend it for anyone that is really invested in their healing. So the things that we talked about, you know, what does breaking a cycle look like? What does a cycle even mean? And things like that. I get into those questions in the book. And apart from that, I also started a community called the Cycle Breakers Club, which you're amazingly a part of. And so that just got started. And it's really for entrepreneurs that have mindset blockages, whether it's starting a business, taking their business to the next step, standing in their identity as a business owner, et cetera. That's a space for entrepreneurs to really support one another and get their mindset right.
Love that. I love that. So tell us where we can find you, because we want to stay up to date with that book launch. So tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, for sure. So my website is priscillamaria.com. So just my name.com. And I'm most active on Instagram at Cycle Breaker Coach. And then on LinkedIn as well, Cycle Breaker Coach. TikTok, technically I have a page, but it's not as poppin' as the other ones. And I couldn't get my username. So it's Cycle Breakers Club on TikTok. And then on Facebook, it's also, I believe, Cycle Breaker Coach. So.
Okay, I love that. So y'all, you definitely got to show Priscilla some love, show her some love, reach out to her. If you have any questions, you know, ask her, reach out. She has the Cycle Breakers Club, and she actually just did a master class, and so that is something that's available to you if you are a part of that community where she does coaching. And how often do you plan on doing your coaching? Because I know that was the first one.
Yeah, so every month we have a group coaching class, and so this past one, which was the first one, was on overcoming imposter syndrome. And so, and that was directly requested by people in the group. So whatever people want to get value from, I'm going to deliver. Like, let's talk about what is really blocking you from achieving your goals, and let's talk about it as a group.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much. This was fun. So before we go, just this or that. So chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
All right. Camping or skydiving?
Ooh, I've done both.
Really?
You know, I'm gonna go with camping. That's a little more chill. Yeah. Camping.
All right. So that is it. That is all, y'all. Thank you so much, Priscilla. Thank you for joining us. We look to have you back. And y'all show my girl some love. Hit her up. You know, if you have questions, reach out to her, and I'm sure she will respond with joy. All right. So y'all, thank you for joining us this week. See you guys back here next week, same time, Thursdays, 8 p.m. If you are new, bring a friend, invite a friend, and you can watch this live on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook each and every week. Have a great week, y'all.